Statius, or the Autonomy of Conscience, Cantos 20 to 26. At the end of Canto 20, Dante and Virgil are on the level of the greedy, when a frightful earthquake shakes the mountain, and everybody shouts Gloria in excelsis Deo, that is, the words that the angels sing at the birth of Jesus Christ. In his poetic fiction, Dante insists a lot, and also at the start of the next canto, on his intense desire to understand what was going on when a person appears who is very important. He will remain on the scene for a good 13 cantos, from 21 to 32 of Purgatory, however misunderstood and underestimated. Statius. We will learn further on that he himself was responsible for the earthquake. It is uncomfortable for the critics to speak about Statius, so many are the inconsistencies and disturbing oddities that accompany him since his appearance. And here, even as Luke records for us that Christ, new risen from his burial cave, appeared too along his way, a shade appeared, and he advanced behind our backs. Purgatory 21, 7-10. As Christ? Moreover, the Gospel passage evoked begins precisely with "and here," and we have seen that even before he appears, he was announced with a reference to Christ, the song of the souls when the earth started to shake. A third parallel with Christ, then, is in the words that Statius addresses to the two. My brothers, may God give you peace. Exactly the same as Jesus said when he appeared to the apostles. Before tackling the significance of the earthquake, let's see the other oddities, beyond the triple reference to Christ, connected to this character. Page 202. When he is presented as the poet Statius, author of the Thebaid and the Achilleid, and great admirer of the Aeneid, he says that he is from Toulouse. Wrong, because Publio Papinio Statius, the poet, was born in Naples, while Toulouse was the city of the birth of the grammarian Lucio Statio Ursolo. Very numerous are the errors that the critics attribute to Dante, without suspecting that they might have been artfully made. In this case, it can also be said that, like many in the Middle Ages, he had confused the two people. But there is another mistake, on which have been written rivers of words that cannot have been anything other than intentional. The translation of a passage from the Aeneid so wrong as to totally misrepresent the meaning. The verses, quid non mortalia pectora cogis aurae sacra fames, to what do you not force the hearts of man, O accursed hunger for gold, is translated as, why cannot you, O holy hunger for gold, restrain the appetite of mortals? Purgatory 22, 40-41. It's enough to consult any edition to realize the embarrassment of the critics and their efforts to correct in some way this misunderstanding. Inexplicable, because one can't think that Dante didn't understand Virgil's Latin. I would like to bring to memory the previous quoted theory of Levi Strauss, according to which authors in periods when they were not free to express their own thoughts, as indeed in the centuries in which the censorship of the Inquisition prevailed, used to attract the attention of the reader with mistakes and oversights to signal those points in which they expressed, between the lines, their own unorthodox thinking. Here, Dante not only charges the figure of Statius with errors more or less common, but he makes Virgil say the following words to him that seem to confirm what has been said. Indeed, because true causes are concealed, we often face deceptive reasoning, and things provoke perplexity in us. Purgatory 22, 28-30. Page 203. Strangest by far, however, is to even make Statius a Christian, of which there is no trace either in his works or any documentation. Numerous studies had been conducted to identify what verses of Statius could have induced him to suppose an attachment to Christianity. But it is research that can only be fruitless and worse, useless, because already in this poetic fiction, Virgil is surprised about his faith and says to him that this is not apparent from his verses. So Dante knows well that Statius is not a Christian, and the only reasonable thing to do is to ask why he had ever created such a beautiful lie. And not just that, but he weaves for us, above all, a story. Disseminated by the messengers of the eternal kingdom, the true belief by then had the whole world filled, and the new preachers preached in such accord with what you had said, and I have just repeated, that I was drawn into frequenting them. Then they appeared to me to be so holy that when Domitian persecuted them, my own laments accompanied their grief. And while I could, as long as I had life, I helped them, and their upright customs made me disdainful of all other sects. Before, within my poem, I led the Greeks unto the streams of Thebes, I was baptized, but out of fear I was a secret Christian, and for a long time showed myself as pagan. Purgatory 22, 76-91. It wasn't only nonconformist scholars who saw in Statius a counter-figure of Dante, but also the more traditional, such as Chiavacci, who writes that Statius speaks like Dante. He actually speaks for Dante, and that Dante makes of him almost his double. At this point, one can reasonably advance the opinion that the fake, page 204, pagan-Christian relationship has been constructed to point to a Catholic-Cathar one, that is, that through this counter-figure, Dante hints at a certain fear to his own need to be a closet Christian, constrained to dissimulate his true belief, demonstrating Catholicism, a practice that was common among the troubadours. So many expressions adapt themselves much better to Catharism than to the non-existent Christianity of Statius. The true belief, as said many times, the Cathars considered their own true. The whole world filled. The commentators note that in reality, in the time of Statius, Christianity was diffused in small centres here and there, while up to Dante's time, the presence of Catharism was truly consistent. So holy, upright customs, values that adapt themselves perfectly to the behaviour of the Cathars. It's also opportune to say 2 words on the Toulousian origin of Statius. There were cities whose names were evoked in all the world, a system of value and meaning. So it was for Babylon, Thebes, and Rome. So it was, but not today, for Toulouse. Toulouse was the city symbol of Occitan Catharism. So, assuming that the error, the confusion between the two Statiuses, was not intentional, certainly intentional had been the choice of a Toulousian as the counter-figure of himself, perhaps specifically to suggest a connection with Catharism. And now, having illustrated the strangeness surrounding the character of Statius, we return to the problem with which we opened this chapter, the earthquake. The ground shook, and everyone sang Gloria in excelsis Deo every time that a soul, as Statius has in this case, reached the end of the purification, and is ready, that is worthy, to climb up to the heavens. So far, nothing heretical. But what determines it? Who decides it? This is the point. Statius begins the explanation saying, "The sanctity of these slopes does not suffer anything that's without order or uncustomary." Purgatory 21, 40-42. Page 205. Statius continues explaining that this earthquake is not like those that happen on earth, That is, that it doesn't have a material, natural origin. Up there, in purgatory real and proper, after the passage through the door with the angel in front, the earth shakes for spiritual reasons. It trembles here whenever any soul feels itself pure, so that it soars or moves to mount aloft, and such a cry attends it, of purity the will alone gives proof, which, being wholly free to change its location, takes by surprise the soul and helps it fly. Purgatory 21, 58 to 63. Celebrated in these brief and high verses is that liberty of conscience that is the cornerstone of all the Dantean purgatory, XX-XXVI. This is true, but there is not only the freedom of conscience, here is celebrated an autonomy of conscience, unthinkable in the world of the Catholic Church, which at the time had already begun for almost a century to exercise that control of conscience that would be perfected and exacerbated in the following years. Here, there are no priests, no bishops, popes, or even God to judge you and tell you what you must do. Here, there is the soul that by itself in full autonomy understands that it has brought its own purification to a finish, and understands it because his heart floods with an unknown joy. In a different context, it is the same sensation that Dante will experience at the end of Paradise, when he will say, "The universal fashion of this not, methinks I saw, since more abundantly in saying this, I feel that I rejoice." Paradise 33, 91 to 93, page 206. This is a horizon of freedom, but also of responsibility, that was a long way off from that of the Catholic Church. Statius explains then how the soul that forever wants to ascend to the heavens voluntarily submits itself to torment, deferring the satisfaction of his first desire. It is a concept, this, fundamental in Dante, that is repeated many times, and not only in the comedy. Nature, instinct, the primal will, the essential desire of the human soul is that of returning to God. To indicate this primal yearning, Statius uses a very particular expression, first good will. Here, there is all the profound significance that the Cathars attributed to this word, ben, that is, as we've already seen, really constitutes for them a sign of recognition in the documents of the time.